to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Hope everybody's staying safe out there. Wasn't feeling too good yesterday, so I took the day off. And I'm going to try to have at least one more video up today. And I'm going to be working on a Jason Garrett film review. Not sure if I'll have that done by today, but it'll definitely be up probably by tomorrow, if not by today. But in this video, I wanted to talk about some of the quotes that came out by Amani Toomer regarding the New York Giants wide receiver core. Now, of course, I did a video on this, I think 2 days ago, my last video that I did from Sports Illustrated talking about, I think it was written by Patricia Traina, talking about the New York Giants receiving core. And in the article, they said that it was the biggest weakness on this football team. Now, I didn't go as far to say that I think it's the biggest weakness, but I at least went on to say that I could acknowledge why somebody would think that. And I do think it may be the least, the worst position in terms of depth. Because after the top three wide receivers, the New York Giants certainly have holes at that position. There's nobody that you could really point to and say, that's a guy who could step in and has proven that he could get the job done. Corey Coleman has some upside, but to this point, he's been a disappointment. So I definitely got that aspect of it, not to mention the New York Giants have guys with a proven track record of being injury prone. In terms of pass catchers with both Evan Ingram and Sterling Shepard. So I certainly got the point of the article, and Amani Toomer really hammered home with it. Now, he didn't talk about the depth of the New York Giants receiving core, but he talked about the three starters and why he thinks they've been somewhat disappointing, or at least, Sterling Shepard specifically, and why they kind of lack that number one wide receiver. And he went on to say that he still doesn't understand why the New York Giants traded Odell Beckham. Well, I certainly understand it, but I'll give my thoughts at the end of the video when I read some of the things that Amani Toomer had to say. And I know it's a very polarizing topic. It's why I don't really talk about Odell Beckham that much on my channel anymore. Some people are never going to understand the trade, and some people are. But I'll give my opinion of what Amani Toomer had to say on the matter after the fact. But let's jump into the video. Let's go down some of the quotes regarding Amani Toomer. Talking about the New York Giants receiving core. And let me just say, Amani Toomer is one of my favorite Giants of all time. In my opinion, the greatest wide receiver in New York Giants history. Here's the first quote. Talking about the Giants receiving core in general. I think it's lacking, Toomer told the Post. I'm a little disappointed with Shepard. I don't know. My dad always used to tell me he's hell when he's well. He's just sick all the time. That's what I think when I think of him. He's just there's always something hurt or something. And that's a fair criticism, I'm going to get into something that he says later about Shepard that I don't think is a fair criticism, but he has been injury prone throughout the course of his career. And recently, a lot of it's been attributed to concussions, something that he had a problem with in high school, I believe, and as well as college. And he hasn't been able to stay on the field. And it has been what has kind of limited Shepard into taking that next step to be that number one guy, which a lot of Giants fans were hoping that he would be. I think we all agree that he's a tough football player. He's a good blocker. He does the things necessary to win. He just can't stay out on the field. The next thing he had to say was regarding Golden Tate. I think Golden Tate is just a tougher version of him. Basically, they're the same receiver, but Golden Tate is a tougher version of him. And when you look at Golden Tate, same height, 5'10". I think they're both 5'10". They both work predominantly in the slot. Now, I think Shepard has at least shown that he has the ability to move to the outside. Tate is kind of strictly a slot wide receiver at this point in his career. So I do think Shepard may have a little more versatility. But to say that Shepard isn't tough, I think that's being a little unfair. Now, you could definitely point to the fact that he's injury prone, but in today's day and age in the NFL, with the concussion protocol, I can't really get on a player's toughness for not playing it through when they have a concussion. That's the league rule. As a matter of fact, Shepard, if I remember correctly, had a concussion last year, and he played through it before they looked back on the videotape, and then they said, all right, you got to sit down and not play for the next couple of games. So I don't really question Shepard's toughness. For me, it's just more his durability and, the fact that he's prone to suffering concussions. The next thing we're going to talk about is Darius Slayton, his thoughts there, and it was short and sweet. Toomer is impressed with Slayton. Slayton, a fifth-round pick out of Auburn last year, led the team with 8 receiving touchdowns. I think he's the guy that has the most upside, Toomer said. And I agree with that. I mean, for the simple reason that Shepard and Tate have kind of been established, right? Tate's 32 years old. Shepard, well, he's not that old yet. I think he's going into his 5th year in the league or whatever it may be. we kind of know what he is. He's a guy that can't stay healthy, that if he ever could is probably 1,000 to 1,100 yard receiver. But Slayton, we don't know yet. Do I think he's going to be elite? Probably not. When I say elite, I mean a top 5 or 6 receiver in the league. But is it possible? Sure. He's fast. He's tall. If he can improve some things in his game, he definitely has a higher ceiling than the other two. I would agree with that. And then finally, he goes on to talk about Odell Beckham. And again, I'm trying to get past Odell Beckham. I'm still confused on why they got rid of Odell, he said. Really confused. And every time I ask somebody in the office, it's like, well, it was a fit thing. And all this nebulous circumstantial stuff. Or, he wasn't a good fit in the locker room. But everybody I talked to loved him. Even the trainers all loved him. So I don't know. They went from having a strength to now it's a position where they need something else. And let's talk about it. Let's talk about Odell, and let's talk about what was once perceived as a strength. First, we'll talk about that. The wide receiver position with Odell Beckham definitely was a strength. Odell Beckham was arguably the best receiver in football for at least some point in time. Now, his last 2 years with the Giants, he only played 16 games, obviously due to the fact that he was injured, and he couldn't stay out on the field, much like the way that you're criticizing Sterling Shepard. Odell Beckham played a season's worth of games over a 2-year span, so he was just as injury-prone as anybody else. He played 4 games the second to last year he was here, and 12 games the last year that he was with the New York Giants. But it was a strength. But here's the thing. For everybody that complains that the New York Giants don't have a strength now in that wide receiver core, those are the same people that complain about the defense. Well, what did Odell Beckham do? He got you 3 core pieces for the future and present of your defense. Rome was not built in a day. The New York Giants were not close to having a perfect football team with Odell, and they're not close yet to having a perfect football team without him. But what that did was that brought in O'Shane Ximines, it brought in Dexter Lawrence, and it brought in Jabril Peppers. All guys that, when I talk to Giants fans, most Giant fans like all of those players. Dexter Lawrence is a very popular player with the fans. They like his upside, right? He was rated the number 1 defensive tackle in last year's draft class. Jabril Peppers, one of the most popular players on the team. Giants fans seem to love him as well. So, and O'Shane Ximines, a lot of fans think he's going to be the breakout player of the year. Not to mention, it also added about $10 million in cap when you factor in the draft expenses for some of those players. And it at least went towards bringing in a guy like Nick Martinez or a guy like, James Bradbury. So you could argue 4 members of our 11-man defense are due in part to the Odell Beckham trade. So yes, did the wide receiving core get worse by trading Odell Beckham? Yes, that's what happens when you make a trade. You have to give up something to get something. But did the defense get better? Yeah. I mean, you guys seem to like those players. They're young and they're on cost-effective contracts. So that's the way a trade works. And what I would argue is it is easier, in my opinion, to find a high-quality wide receiver in the draft, even outside of the first round. I did a video on this. Out of the Pro Bowl wide receivers over the last 10 draft classes, or from 2007, I think it was, to 2017, 2/3 of them came in the second round or later. It is a position where you could find value deep in a draft. A guy like Darius Slayton, for example. And there's several other examples that you could point to. So I think it was... And not to mention, to say you don't know why, this guy came out and said that he didn't like playing in New York anymore. Maybe I'm paraphrasing a bit, but he said he wanted to play in L.A. He did go on to bash Eli Manning, whether it was, saying his name directly or not. So if you can't at least understand the Giants' perspective saying we're bringing in a young quarterback, we don't want him to have to deal with a guy that's going to go to the media every time he complains. And you're seeing the same thing in Cleveland now. There's been rumors coming out that the Browns are looking to potentially trade him. Was Odell Beckham a great wide receiver? 110%. One of the most talented wide receivers, probably the most talented wide receiver in New York Giants history. But to not understand the trade, that's just not being fair. That's my take on it. In terms of the wide receiving core as a whole, I can't disagree with them, at least from a depth standpoint. I question the comments about Shepard's toughness, but I agree. I worry about Shepard's longevity in the NFL. And Golden Tate is not getting any younger. So I agree with them in that sense that, yes, they will need to build this wide receiving core. And I expect them to do that in next year's draft and possibly even in next year's free agency. But it's a process. The team's you're not gonna be able to turn what that team was into a contender in 1 year. That's not the way it works. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.